Hello and welcome to this tutorial for users of Microsoft Excel 2016 for the Mac. In this tutorial we're going to continue looking at tables in Excel, and here we're going to look at pivot tables. In previous tutorials you've seen how we can use sorting, filters and the subtotal tool to organize and analyze data, but pivot tables allow you to do that analysis with much more flexibility, as you will see. So we'll get started and create a pivot table. The first thing you need to do is simply click anywhere into the table, then go to the Insert tab, and over on the left you'll see this Table section, and click on the Pivot Table button. The Create Pivot Table dialog appears, as you can see there, and the range of the table has been selected automatically, so Excel will auto detect. If you don't have the correct range, or if you want to select a limited range for your analysis, then you can reselect if you want to do that. But I'm going to use the full table here, so I'll leave it as it is, automatically selected. The next section simply asks me where I would like to place the pivot table. By default, New Worksheet is selected, but you also have the option of placing the pivot table into the existing worksheet. However, I will leave New Worksheet selected and click OK. And here we have the new worksheet, and on the left you'll see a space to create our pivot table. And on the right we have another dialog box called Pivot Table Builder. And in Pivot Table Builder you'll see at the top we have a list of our column headers from the table. So everything from sale code through to total sale. And at the bottom of the Pivot Table Builder we have these blank windows that I'll come back to in a moment. You should also note that when your pivot table is selected you get two new toolbar tabs, and those are Pivot Table Analyze and the Design tab. For now I'm going to leave Pivot Table Analyze selected, and over on the right hand side of that tab you'll notice there are three buttons called Show, and the first of those buttons is Field List, and if I click on Field List you'll notice that Pivot Table Builder window disappears. So if for some reason your Pivot Table Builder dialog box isn't visible already, come to the Show section on the right side of that Pivot Table Analyze toolbar and click Field List, and you will have that dialog box available. And let's create our first pivot table then. And we're going to do a bit of analysis involving my movie titles and my sellers. So first of all I'm going to click on the movie option there and drag that into the columns box. So basically my movie titles have become column headers for the pivot table. For the row of my table I'm going to use my sellers as the source, so click on Sold By and drag that into the rows box, and you'll see the names of my sellers have now appeared on the table. And finally I'm going to take the total sale column header, or the total sale data, and drag that into the values box. So there's my first pivot table. So the source for the columns section is the movie titles, the source for the rows is our sellers, and the source for the values box is our total sale figures. So now that I've done that, I'm going to close down the Pivot Table Builder. I'm going to change the zoom level so I can see the table a little bit more clearly. So I'm going to come down to the bottom right of the Excel window, click that 100% button and set the zoom level to 150%, click OK. And so this is a completely different layout for the table data, and it's not something I could have achieved without using the pivot table. Now you'll also see I have column labels and row labels, and these are basically filters that are built into the pivot table. And if I click on the drop down arrow where column labels is, you'll see we have the familiar filter dialog box, and I can come down to the filter section, remove select all, and you notice that all my movie titles have vanished, and I can then click on the ones that I would like to feature in my analysis. And if I just move that dialog box down a little bit you can see more clearly. And of course I can do the same thing with the row labels drop down, so if I click on that drop down arrow there we get the filter for the names, and I might just want to see Fred and Jane and look at their details. I'll close that filter dialog for now. Now when you want to remove the filters you can click on the appropriate drop down and choose Clear Filter. Alternatively, if I just close that dialog down, you can come up to the Pivot Table Analyze toolbar, and you'll see in the Action section we have a clear button, and if I click on the drop down there we have the option to clear filters. So if I click on that the filters are removed. You'll also notice that we have totals applied here, so I have a grand total at the bottom, so for each movie the grand total, and if I scroll to the right to the end of the table, you also see we have totals for each of our sellers. I'll just scroll back to the beginning of the table again. Now if you don't want these additional filter labels, which are column labels and row labels here, you come across the right side of the pivot table Analyze toolbar and you'll see the Field Headers button, and if you click on that, those two items are removed, and if for some reason they're missing and you want them back, you simply click that button and you put them back in place. There's another way you can create a filter for your pivot tables, and if I click on the Field List button to bring that pivot table builder back into view, what I'm going to do is move the movies from columns to the filter box on the left there. So if I click and drag across, you'll see the table has changed again and the movie titles have vanished. Now you'll also notice at the top we have this movie label and a drop down arrow here, and if I click on the drop down arrow you'll see we get our movie titles. Now first of all I'll take the Select All checkbox away and let's just look at the detail for Casablanca. So you'll see as I select the movie, the sale updates. So I can see there for Casablanca the sale total. If I remove the check from that, I can come and look at Gone with the Wind, remove the check from that, and look at It's a Wonderful Life. So here you have very precise control over which information you're going to look at and what level of detail you want to see. And when you finish your individual movie sales analysis, you could click Clear Filter to see the grand total again, close that dialog, and then perhaps move the movies from filter again just by clicking and dragging back to columns, and again you see there the movies have their own individual column again. I'm going to rearrange the table again and move my sellers into the filters box, and I'm going to add ticket quantity to the values box, and I'll also move the movies back to filters as well. So I've got two filters at the top of the table and just a grand total figure there, as you can see. So now I could click on the filter for sold by and take the Select All away and just click on, for example, Fred, and then click on the drop down for the movie filter. First deselect all the movies, and then I'll click on the first one there, Casablanca, and if I just move the dialog slightly to one side. So we can now see Fred's selling activity for just Casablanca. The total sale value is $84.50 and the total number of tickets sold is 22. So again, there's an example of how pivot tables allow you much greater control over what you see and how you analyze the data. So I'll just clear the filter and close the dialog box. I'm going to create a new pivot table and I want to clear all the existing data, and to do that I simply go to the Clear button again. Remember that's on the Pivot Table Analyze toolbar and it's in the Action section. Click on the drop down and choose Clear All. And that effectively resets the pivot table. So for my new table I'm going to apply Filters Area and also Screening Month. And for my row labels I'm going to put the movie titles and also the sold by, so my sellers also into rows. And finally place total sale into my values box there. So by having movie and then sold by in my rows box, you'll see in the pivot table the movie titles and under each title the seller who has sold tickets for that movie. So for example, under Casablanca we have 2 sellers, under Citizen Kane we have 3 sellers, and so on. You'll also notice little minus buttons next to the movie title. If I click on that, I can actually collapse the detail again for each title. You can also expand or collapse all the detail by coming again to the Pivot Table Analyze toolbar, and over on the left hand side in this Active Field section you'll see we have Expand Field and Collapse. So if I click on Collapse Field first of all, that basically hides all the detail for each movie, and if I click on Expand Field we again get all the detail, as you can see there. You have other options available in the Design tab, and if I click the Design tab there, if I come over to the left side of that toolbar you'll see the Layout section, and the leftmost button is Subtotals. If I click on that you'll see there the option to not show subtotals, and you'll see on the table there the subtotals disappear, and I can bring them back by saying show all subtotals at bottom or at top. So I shall show them at the top of the group, and if I scroll down to the end of the table you see the grand total there, and you can also hide grand totals. If I click on the drop down for grand totals I can turn those totals off as well if I don't want to see them. However, I do for now, so let's turn them back on again. You'll notice you have the option of turning on the totals for both rows and columns, or for only rows or just for columns. But for now, I will leave rows and columns totals on, and that's the default position for pivot tables. So you'll find that subtotals and totals are active unless you switch them off with these two buttons. Now if I click back into my pivot table and just use the keyboard shortcut Control and Home to jump back to the beginning again, I'm going to show you a different way of changing the table layout. So instead of the movie followed by each person that sold tickets for that movie, I would like to see the sellers and then each movie they've sold tickets for below. All I would need to do is come back to my pivot table builder, and I'm going to click on movie and simply drag that below the sold by option. You can see the line there indicating that that's where you'll be dragging the label to. So if I release the mouse button now, you'll see the table has completely changed, and now we have the seller at the top, and underneath that as a subsection all the movies that the seller has sold tickets for, and there we see the total sales at the top and then the detail below. And just as before, if I want to collapse the detail, go back to pivot table analyze and just make sure I've actually clicked into one of the seller names. So if I click on Fred, you'll see there that my expand and collapse buttons become active. And I can click on collapse to hide the detail, and again expand to show the detail, or individually I can just hide the detail of each person as I choose. At the moment you can see that the sum function has been applied to our calculations, and that's been the case throughout this tutorial. But what if you want to apply a different type of function? Well, you can do that as well. So for example, if I simply click into the total sale column, what I need to do here is go to the active field section on the pivot table analyze toolbar, click on the field settings button, and if I drag that dialog box across there, you'll see the different functions we have available. So if I click on count, for example, I might want to see the number of sales that have been made. So click OK. And now you can see if I just open the detail up again, so if I click on one of my names, expand the fields. So now we see the number of transactions as opposed to the total value of the transactions. Hopefully you've seen there how flexible the pivot table can be, and I'm sure you can find a way you can apply this to the tables that you're working on. One last thing I'll show you here is again on that pivot table analyze toolbar. Over on the left you'll see an options button. Click on the drop down and select show report filter pages, and I'll just bring that dialog across there. You'll see it says show all pages of, and I have screening month or area. I'm going to select area and click OK, and you'll see we now have 4 new tabs on the worksheet. So we have east, north, south and west. So with a click of a button we've effectively created 4 new pivot tables from a single pivot table. So maybe you can find a way to apply that to the tables that you're working on. But in the meantime, that concludes this look at pivot tables. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.